The news that Josh Duggar had been arrested on child pornography charges came as a shock due to the appalling nature of the allegations against the former reality star. And yet, on some level, it didn't come as a shock at all. Unfortunately, Josh's actions probably aren't all that surprising when one considers the many horrific things he's been accused of over the course of his relatively short life. And of course, no one is more familiar with the nature of the 33-year-old's horrifying past than his earliest victims. We're talking, of course, about Josh's own sisters. As you may recall, it was revealed in 2015 that Josh had molested 5 young girls when he was still in his teens. 4 of the molestation victims were his sisters. The 5th victim was a babysitter who had been hired by Josh's parents. At the time, most of the family kept quiet about it, but there were exceptions. Jim, Bob, and Michelle appeared for an interview with Megyn Kelly, as did Jill and Jessa Duggar. Everyone stuck to the script and claimed it was an isolated incident, and that there was no risk of Josh ever engaging in such behaviors ever again. Of course, they only went into damage control mode and addressed this at all after their attempts to cover it up were exposed in the media, and of course no one could really know what would happen next. But since Josh was never received any sort of punishment or treatment following the revelation of his criminal behavior, it's not surprising that he continued to claim victims. And now one of those victims is speaking out, Jinger Duggar. The timing of his latest scandal coincides with the release of Jinger Duggar and Jeremy Violo's new memoir, The Hope We Hold. Understandably, she is appalled at the allegations against Josh and cutting ties for good. In the book, Jinger opens up about her experiences with her family's infamous abuser. "My brain hadn't quite caught up to the reality of what had happened in a few short hours," Jinger wrote. Intimate details about our lives were splashed across a magazine page and all over the internet for anyone and everyone to read. I felt shell-shocked, as if a bomb had exploded. One of my siblings had made some sinful choices, but it had all been years ago. It had been awful, but we had dealt with it as a family. We'd sought the Lord, took the necessary steps to move toward healing, and offered up our forgiveness. Now that it was out in the public, the old wound was open again, raw, painful. Here you can see that Jinger is still somewhat sticking to Jim Bob's official messaging. She insists that by reopening old wounds, the media was just as bad as Josh. It's not her fault, of course, as she's been victimized by Jim Bob's lies almost as much as by Josh's actions. From there, Jinger detailed the methods Jim Bob employed for a late-night escape. It seems the bus the Duggars used in those days was backed up to their house. Conveniently, that way, the family could escape without encountering any paparazzi. We were getting away for a few days until this all died down. The destination, a place with plenty of land to run around outside without anyone seeing us. It would be the perfect place to escape the cameras without being cooped up inside for the foreseeable future. I felt like an Israelite fleeing Egypt under the cover of darkness. All I knew is we were leaving that night. Amazingly, the escape plan worked, but as Jim Bob was no doubt aware, fallout from the news of the first Duggar sex scandal was just beginning. By the time we left, the photographers were asleep, and nobody noticed when the bus pulled out of the driveway and headed down the road in the dark of night. The bus engine rumbled and my brothers and sisters chattered noisily, but I barely noticed. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. How do we go forward, I thought. From there, it seems that Jinger began to realize that things would never go back to the way they were before. People outside my close circle now knew details about my life that I had never chosen to share, she wrote. Details that I had never wanted to share, and there would be fallout. That goes without saying when you lead a public life. I just didn't know how far it would go. We can see why Jinger would mourn the loss of her privacy, but unfortunately, the adults in her life couldn't be trusted to protect her. Ultimately, this necessitated the intervention of the authorities, and frankly, you have to question how culpable Jim, Bob, and Michelle were in not involving them years ago. Now, years later, we learn that Josh is up to his old nauseating tricks, and he's still being enabled by those around him. Hopefully Josh, himself the father of 6, soon-to-be 7 kids, will never again be in a position where he is able to victimize children. He faces at least 20 years in prison if convicted. That's it for now, thank you for watching, please subscribe to stay tuned.